This two-part presentation contains BGA advice on safe winch launching. This first part summarises how to fly a winch launch safely. Part 2 provides some explanations for the advice given here. A short presentation cannot cover everything. Please ask an instructor if you need further information or explanation. Some, but not all of the charts contain a voiceover introduction like this. Winch launching is a proven, efficient, low-cost method of launching gliders. It has a good safety record, with approximately one accident, usually minor, every 13,000 launches. However, because there are so many winch launches every year, even this low accident rate has given rise to a large number of accidents. Since 1974, there have been 35 fatalities and 73 serious injuries from winch launches in the UK. An average of 1 death and 2 serious injuries per year. This slide shows the breakdown of all fatal and serious injury gliding accidents between 1974 and 2005. Winch accidents accounted for 97 out of a total of 317 fatal or serious injury glider accidents between 1974 and 2005, 30% of the total. The numbers in brackets for winch accidents show the number of these accidents that involved a stall or spin. As you can see, such accidents involving a stall or spin made up the vast majority of fatal winch accidents. Let's now turn to look at just where accidents occur in the winch launch process. Fatal injury on a winch launch arises predominantly during rotation or after launch failure in mid-launch. Serious injury is mainly at these stages and after launch failure near the ground. What hazards led to these accidents? This chart shows fatal and serious injury accident totals by launch phase and indicates the particular hazard that most frequently led to these accidents. As you will see, the main hazard that can lead to a serious accident differs depending on the stage of the launch. An understanding of how these hazards arise and how to avoid them can help to make winch launching a safer activity for everyone. In summary, the main hazards are a cartwheel following a wing drop on the ground run, a stall and a flick roll during rotation, a stall following a launch failure near the ground, and a spin following a mid-launch failure. Let's look at these hazards one by one. First, a wing drop before takeoff. The following sequence of photographs illustrates graphically how things can very quickly go wrong when a wing drops during the winch ground run. The photographs that you will see were taken at 1-second intervals. Glider P is being launched. The wing has dropped. The instructor tried to release, but the release knob slipped through his gloved hand. If you look closely, you can see the control positions are full left aileron and rudder and stick forward. It seems likely that the glider will crash. The airspeed is very low. At last, the nose begins to come down. And in this case, they land safely. The pilots in the photographic sequence were lucky. They landed safely. The next video is a simulation showing just how quickly and catastrophically things can get completely out of hand following a wing drop. The wing was put on the ground with left aileron and left rudder. Note how quickly the glider cartwheels. Releasing the cable after the wing has dropped will not stop a cartwheel that has already begun. There is one simple key message to remember if confronted with a dropping wing. Release before the wing touches the ground. The next point in the winch launch process where serious accidents occur is during rotation. Accidents at this stage of the launch are predominantly stalls and flick rolls. Although rare, accidents of this type are usually fatal. These accidents occur as a result of a too low an airspeed coupled with a too rapid rotation rate. Once again, we will illustrate the accident using a simulation. The winch launch was flown with a rotation rate that was too fast. The glider flicks and rolls at an airspeed of about 65 knots. A flick roll during rotation results from a combination of a low airspeed and a high rotation rate. Modelling shows that the stall speed for a glider with a 1G stalling speed of 34 knots will rise to about 50 knots during rotation on a winch launch if the rotation rate is 20 degrees per second. The stall speed will rise even further if the rate of rotation is even faster. Once again, the advice for avoiding these accidents is relatively straightforward. Maintain a shallow climb until adequate speed is seen with continuing acceleration. Ensure the transition from level flight at takeoff to the full climb is controlled and progressive. Now we turn to low-level launch failures. By launch failure, we mean anything that causes an incomplete launch, such as a cable break, a winch power failure, or the pilot releasing. In these situations at low level, the main hazard is a stall. Accidents resulting from power loss below 100 feet used to be very common. The video clip that we are about to see happened at Sutton Bank. Fortunately, the pilot was not injured. The glider is probably in a mushing stall as it hits the ground. In the event of a power loss at low height, the overriding action is to immediately lower the nose to the appropriate recovery attitude prior to landing ahead. Minimizing the reaction time is crucial. You need to anticipate power loss on every launch and be ready to lower the nose without delay. Now we look at a launch failure later in the launch, at a few hundred feet. Accidents resulting from a loss of power in mid-launch usually involve a spin. The video clip we're about to see is from Germany. The glider had a real cable break at 250 feet. There was ample room ahead, but the pilot turned downwind. The glider spins from a height of half a wingspan. Now we can see some photographs of a real cable break where the pilot was very slow in taking the correct recovery action. The photographs in this sequence were taken 0.4 seconds apart. Note the takeoff attitude with the nose high and the tail still on the ground. After the break, the glider continues to climb for 2 seconds, decelerating all the time. The nose is then lowered, but not to a recovery attitude. For the next 5 seconds, the glider is close to a stall. Eventually, the pilot adopts a more nose-low attitude and lands ahead. After a cable break in mid-launch, it is essential to maintain the recovery attitude until the glider attains its approach speed. Then, and only then, is it safe to maneuver. The following simulation shows what can happen when the pilot gets everything wrong. The cable breaks. The pilot does not react immediately, with a resulting loss of speed. The nose is eventually lowered to the normal gliding attitude. The pilot then turns immediately. The glider spins. From 1974 to 2005, Accidents of this kind were the most common fatal winch launch accident. To avoid accidents of this type, it is imperative to adopt the correct recovery attitude. Wait until the glider has attained the approach speed. Land ahead if it is safe to do so. The videos and simulations that we have seen have hopefully illustrated what can go wrong. Although the results can be very serious, it is very easy to avoid getting into these situations. The next slide summarizes the main hazards and the appropriate avoiding actions. If you cannot keep the wings level on the ground run, release before the wing touches the ground. Always keep your hand on the cable release to ensure that you can do this without delay. Avoid a stall during rotation by maintaining a shallow climb until you see the ASI going through 1.5 times the stalling speed with continued acceleration, and then allow the glider to rotate at a controlled pace. If you have a launch failure near the ground, immediately adopt an appropriate recovery attitude and land ahead. Do not use the air brakes unless the glider has attained an appropriate attitude combined with a safe speed. For failure in mid-launch, lower the nose to the recovery attitude and allow the glider to accelerate to the approach speed. Land ahead if that can be done safely. This advice is from the BGA Safe Winching Initiative. If you are in any doubt about whether you should follow it, the next slide should persuade you. In the 6 years since this advice was first published, there have been a total of 4 fatal or serious injury winch accidents. In the preceding 6 years, there had been 18, in line with the 6-year average for the entire period between 1976 and 2005. There were no fatal or serious winch accidents in either 2010 or 2011. We have achieved this reduction in fatal and serious injury accidents in the last 6 years because fewer pilots have stalled and spun on the wire or after a launch failure. The chart shows the number of fatal and serious winch accidents at each stage of the launch and compares the figures for the last 6 years, in blue, with the long-term 6-year average, in red. As you will see, the number of accidents in each of the arrowed categories has declined dramatically. Stalling and spinning accidents occur at these stages, and it is the number of stalling and spinning accidents that have declined in the last 6 years. Let's look at substantial damage accidents. The pattern of winch accidents that resulted in substantial damage to gliders tells a similar story to that of the fatal or serious injury accidents. Again, there is a marked reduction in stall-spin accidents after a launch failure. Less satisfactorily, there has been no significant change in wing drop accidents, or accidents after a recovery from a launch failure and a resulting difficult circuit. Let's look at all winch accidents, including the minor ones. Again, we see a reduction in stall-spin accidents. There is no reduction in accidents following a wing drop. Encounters with the launching cable continue. In summary, we are making progress. Thanks to the efforts of all pilots, we have seen a dramatic reduction in the number of stall-spin accidents following a winch launch failure. However, we must not become complacent. Continued efforts are needed to ensure all pilots fly a safe winch launch profile and take the correct action in an emergency. The first priority is to avoid a stall or spin. Whilst accidents arising from the main hazards have reduced significantly, there are other areas where we can do better. Cartwheels following wing drops on the ground run, cable encounters, and accidents following a launch failure and a potentially difficult circuit. As well as maintaining the progress to date, reducing stall and spin accidents, Please let us all make our other main priorities: release if you cannot keep the wings level, avoid cable encounters, and avoid accidents after a circuit following a real or simulated launch failure. It appears that the advice that has been derived from the Safe Winch Launching Initiative can help pilots avoid serious injury and can save lives. To reiterate, if you are unable to keep the wings level during the ground run, release immediately before the wing touches the ground. Waiting until the wing touches the ground before releasing may be too late, putting you into an unrecoverable situation. In the early stage of the launch, maintain a shallow climb until your airspeed is adequate, at least 1.5 times the stall speed, with continuing acceleration. Once this speed is reached, ensure that the transition to the full climb is controlled and progressive. A safe transition from level flight at takeoff to the full climb typically takes 5 seconds. If power is lost near the ground, immediately lower the nose to the appropriate recovery attitude and land ahead. If power is lost in mid-launch, lower the nose to the recovery attitude and wait until the ASI shows the approach speed. Do not maneuver or use the air brakes until the approach speed has been attained. Land ahead if it is safe to do so. The BGA has published a Safe Winch Launch leaflet, which expands the advice in this presentation. The same advice, with additional background, is in a booklet published in February 2010. Both, together with simulations and a quiz to test your knowledge of the subject, are available on the BGA website at www.gliding.co.uk/safe winch launching. As well as being available as downloads, clubs should also have stocks of the booklet and leaflet. Please secure your own personal copy of both publications. Thank you for viewing this presentation. If you have any questions about any of the advice given, please don't hesitate to discuss this with an instructor. Instructors may request additional information from safetycom@gliding.co.uk.